Hello, everyone. And if we could, let's begin with a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much, and we shall officially call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Welcome. I don't see any faces that aren't familiar faces. All these smiles, I don't know if it's because the summer's coming to an end or whether we're going to have a lot of fun tonight or what, but we're glad to see the smiles, and thank you for being here. And let's pledge allegiance to the flag, which is to my right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 4 on the agenda is consideration of approving the agenda as presented. And Mr. Fletcher, I understand you want to change.
I'd like to add an agenda item, please. Make it agenda item 6A, discussion and possible action on appointment of alternate member Ms. Ann Arnold as a regular member of the Board of Adjustments to fill the seat brought about by the resignation of regular member Larry Reinhardt. The clerk has that.
Okay, Chair will consider a motion to approve the agenda as
Second.
proposed to amend. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. All righty.
I'd like to also add another agenda item for discussion and possible action to revise paragraph K of Chapter 72, parking regulations. And I'm sorry I didn't get that on the agenda, but being out of the country, there's no excuse,
Discussion
but
with David.
I was out of the country.
I'm sorry, would you state that again?
I'd like to add another agenda item for a discussion and possible action to revise paragraph K of Chapter 72, which is parking regulations. And I'd like that to be 8A.
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry, I guess I'm the slowest one in the room. Is that something that's already on the agenda you're adding to?
No. I'm adding.
Okay, so you're adding something. We don't have any information in the package, right?
No.
Okay,
I-
so,
I would just ask, this is one of those, this gets to be one of those difficult ones when we don't have things in front of us. Is it so critical it can't wait until September? Because again, when we don't have the writing and everything in front of us, we're discussing something that we just don't have the piece of paper and what we're working on.
Yeah, I'm probably going to piggyback Pat on 8, I called it 8A only because after the police report, I noticed that there's been quite a number of increases in citations being issued for parking in the right-of-way between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
what's the pleasure of the board? We have a motion. No, we got a motion. Do we have a second?
It was seconded.
I would object to adding that to the agenda. I have no objection to the earlier addition to the agenda because there was a mistake that was made, and we're going to rectify that. But this agenda item, there is no urgency. We discussed it at the last Board of Commissioners meeting, and if we wanted to add it to the agenda, we should have made that type of a motion then, or in the interim, and we would have timely and we have the ability to read it and to discuss it. So I would vote no.
Any more discussion before we
Well,
vote?
yep. I would normally agree, but in this case, I am getting a number of telephone calls, complaints from people who
You don't
have gotten
know.
citations. And I would like to see if we can't resolve something more quickly than wait another month to do it. I've also seen people get parking citations in an area that has no signage whatsoever, that there's no overnight parking. So I would like to at least revisit and see if we can do anything about it more quickly than a month from now.
John, I would just say that we discussed this ordinance at least 3 or 4 times. we discussed with the attorney the necessity for posting signs. The attorney told us there was no need to post signs for the parking, is my recollection, because I had said to you, I find that strange that there's no notice that people can't park. You said ignorance of the law is no excuse. Right? And so if it took us 3 meetings to get the ordinance in place, I don't think we want to rush to change it in 10 minutes at this meeting.
I don't think I'd want to change it, but maybe explain how it's supposed to be implemented. I think maybe there's a misinterpretation of what was intended by the board.
Then if you change the agenda item to discuss, but not take action on, then I won't object to it.
No, I didn't make that, that's not my,
But I'm just saying.
Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
aye.
Opposed, say no.
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 Okay, it's 3-2, Madam Clerk. It will be added, and it's gonna be what number?
8A, please.
Okay, everybody understand we've approved and amended the agenda by adding 6A and 8A? Okay, let's move to number 5, and I would ask for the purpose of saving time to consider 5A, B, C, D, and E. Chair would like to hear a motion to approve those minutes.
I have one change I'd like to make in the
Okay.
minutes. It's on page 22, the middle paragraph, 4th line. The sentence begins, "We might," and there should be a "not even get the information on what was proposed." The "not" is not where it belongs.
Everybody understand that?
The sentence currently says, "We might even get the information on what proposed program could be for 2-3 years down the line." And it should read, "We might not even get the information." So we just have to interject "not."
Do you understand what is suggested, Madam Clerk?
Okay.
Commissioners, you all understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so is that a motion that we approve with this
Yes.
correction?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All these minutes, A through E, are approved with that change. Number 6, public comments, and I have no one that has signed up for comments. However, since the agenda has been amended, is there anyone that wants to speak to those 2 items? And which one? I bet it's parking. Okay. Anyone else? All right, Ms. Marlene. The chair recognizes you.
Thank you.
Ms.
Well, I may have some good news, but I don't know. For 25 years, my son and family have been visiting me at my home at 126 Canal Drive. I am Marlene Barbs. They have always parked their cars either across the street on the waterway property, which I own, or on the edge of the property in a vacant lot next door. No one has ever complained of this arrangement. We are not blocking access to the property or the road. Last Saturday, at 2:20 a.m., my son was issued a parking ticket for parking between 2 and 5 a.m. on the empty lot. The previous ordinance allowed 72 hours. There are no signs notifying anyone of this restriction. I find this ordinance too restrictive. I was told by the police whom I talked to that they have to issue a $75 ticket, as it is a violation of an ordinance which restricts cars from being parked in the right-of-way on any lot. I understand this includes even areas along the front of one's personal property. I am the only full-time resident on this street, other than Tony Holden at the other end of Conch Street. I've seen numerous visitor cars parked overnight in the right-of-way on the corner flatbed truck with house moving supplies parked there. This same truck was also parked on the west side of Shrimp Street on vacant lots next to the road. There is a house at 122 Shrimp Street that created the gravel areas parallel next to the street. And they had 2 vehicles parked on them all last week, as well as parking in the vacant lot next to their house. I am wondering if they were ticketed. They certainly were on the right of way, and they were there over several nights. I know one of the reasons this ordinance was reworked was to allow certain homeowners to put small fences in the right of way to keep visitors from parking in their yards. But I do think it is too restrictive, and it makes more sense for the police to check with the homeowner nearest the parked vehicle to see if it belongs to them or their family before issuing a citation. I object to paying this exorbitant fine, and if the town will not change this ordinance, then signs should be put up immediately to notify visitors of these restrictions. This part of the ordinance is totally unfair to full-time residents and their visitors. You are on your way to ruining our family beach image, and you are saying no to off-street parking overnight at any time. By the way, I believe the town's right-of-way is in place for utilities and other town work that needs to be done. A temporary sign to notify vehicles when parking is restricted. It should be able to be used by the landowner when needed, especially for extra parking or having overnight guests. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 6A.
I move that the Board of Commissioners appoint Board of Adjustment alternate member Ms. Ann Arnold as a regular member of the Board of Adjustment to fill the vacancy brought about with the resignation of regular member Larry Reinhardt.
Second.
Discussion?
I don't know that we need any. I think most of us know the situation. Ms.
Well-
Arnold is one of 2 alternates. She has certainly had over 6 years, or at least 6 years' experience as an alternate. Went through training with me 5.5 years ago. She may be the only person on the board that has had the training, has how to be a good member there. I think she's obviously a good choice, and that was my reason for bringing it up.
Well, I would say that very rarely do I attend a committee meeting or a hearing. I did attend the one this week, and I was very embarrassed the fact that the nice lady that was appealing with tears in her eyes had to sit and wait because of not having the members there to participate and proceed. And I'm also having a difficult time understanding why someone like Ms. Arnold, putting in all this time, had been continually pushed to the back of the line for this appointment. So I'm glad to see that you guys have moved in that direction. I hope that you would follow through and do it. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Number 7, Mr. Gwynn and Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please, the mayor, step over here. And want to say thank you for this opportunity to come before you with our August monthly report. Being here at the end of the summer and also having a whirlwind of activity since we were last before you in May. I know that you receive monthly updates from us, and we do that intentionally to make sure you're aware of what's going on a regular basis. We thought that in the larger scheme of things, with what's been going on in Washington, it'd be good to come before you here during the August recess that Congress has taken, but that we are all still continuing to work. Glad to have Roger Gwynn, the CEO of the Ferguson Group, with us. As you know, Ferguson Group is working with us on the legislative monitoring and research that occurs in Washington on Capitol Hill. And both he and Stephanie Misser and Earl Stockdale were with us when we were here in May. I wanted to first bring you up to speed about the larger picture, and then we'll hone right in specifically in respect of time tonight, but you have several other agenda items about what's been going on in Washington, and then how that ties right into what we're about here at Holden Beach. The broader picture, a lot has happened even in the last 30 to 45 days, which is another reason I thought it would be important to come on down and be with you tonight. A major breakthrough has occurred to help finally move the fiscal year 2020 appropriations bills across the finish line Under the federal year, as many of you may know, the federal calendar technically starts for the fiscal year October 1st, rather than July 1st like it does for the state and for entities of the state, such as counties and towns and cities. So, in an effort to have a breakthrough on the appropriations bill and hopefully avoid what is called a continuing resolution that has occurred several years in a row now in Washington to keep the government from shutting down, there has been finally a bipartisan budget act 2019 passed on August 1st. And it would allow these appropriation bills to go forward to meet, hopefully, if everything stays in order, to meet the September 30th deadline before the October 1st new fiscal year. With that, the Senate now, who had been waiting for a budget deal before finalizing any of the appropriation bills, is now ready to move forward through its Appropriations Committee. The House Appropriations Committee had already approved most of its bills and was waiting on this situation for the Senate to move forward. It's expected that at least some of these 2020 appropriation bills will require short-term extensions, but we anticipate that the main one that we're concerned about with our work for you out in Holden Beach, the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, which is the one that provides funding to the Army Corps of Engineers, will at minimum be approved by September 30th. The Senate appropriators have indicated that it will be one of the first bills out of the gate. So stay tuned, and as you hear national news and what bills are moving now by both houses to finalize the budget for 2020, that should be one of the first ones, energy and water. With regard to some specifics under that, the National Flood Insurance Program, which is something that is a concern always to residents in coastal areas like this, there has been continual discussion once again about reauthorizing the National Flood Insurance Program before the program is set to expire September 30th. After some late-minute opportunities to try to get it done before the August recess, things went silent because what thought was an agreement did not come through. But there are NFIP reauthorization bills pending in both the House and Senate. However, the bills are different substantially. And that's where there's going to have to be some considerable negotiation between the House and the Senate in order to work out a conference to build. So if that doesn't happen, Labor Day weekend, of course, will occur before Congress goes back. That only really gives them 3 to almost 4 weeks to authorize this program by September 30th. If that does not happen because of the major differences between the House and Senate, then it's anticipated another short-term extension would be required for the flood insurance program. If so, this would be the 13th short-term extension just in the last 2 years. But we do know that Congress is determined not to let it lapse. They will at least do a short-term extension if they don't get a permanent solution. On July 30th, on another note, there's a coastal resilience bill that's been introduced that could have great positive optimism in terms of future programs for areas like Holden Beach. On July 30th, Representatives Don Bayer and Francis Rooney, one a Democrat, one a Republican, introduced a bipartisan bill, the National Ocean and Coastal Security Improvements Act, which is H.R. 4093. This bill would support coastal communities' ability to prepare for and respond to a variety of coastal threats, from extreme weather events, climate hazards, changing ocean conditions, to improving coastal infrastructure and supporting coastal research, resiliency, conservation, and restoration work. This would allow for a fund to be set up to be used for national and state block grants and national competitive grant programs. So stay tuned. This is in the early stages, obviously, because it was just dropped right before the August recess. But it is a bill that coastal states and communities have taken note of, the National Ocean and Coastal Security Improvements Act. On another front, the Transportation Infrastructure Bill that focuses on resilience has come forward. This is a long-awaited transportation reauthorization bill. Generally, transportation bills are only approved every 5 years in terms of strategic planning on transportation needs. On July 29th, again, just in the last 45 days, America's Transportation Infrastructure Act of 2019 to authorize funding and give program direction to the U.S. DOT for the years 2021 to 2025 has now been put in place. On the very next day, July 30th, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee held a markup to make several additional changes to the bill, and they voted it out 21-0. When you hear a vote like that in Washington, everyone knows transportation is important to everybody. And so the bill is being referred to as the most, and I quote, substantial highway legislation in history by the committee. So stay tuned to what all that's going to include and will ultimately include by the time it gets to the floor for a vote. Here are some key provisions right now that we have noted that will have effect on coastal communities such as this one, should this bill go to fruition, which is anticipated it probably will, especially given that kind of committee support. The bill includes a new National Highway Performance Program with prioritization on measures that increase resiliency to the impact levels of extreme weather events, flooding, if there is any sea level rise, any other natural disasters. It also improves the resiliency to federal aid highways, particularly with regard to bridges. There's another provision under emergency relief that would allow emergency funds to focus on proactive features to improve resiliency. Like what? Like raising bridges where they need to be to increase waterway openings, deepening channels, improving drainage, replacing or upsizing culverts, using seismic monitoring on bridges, and using a host of other natural infrastructure opportunities to mitigate the risks that communities face from storms and flooding. That's under the emergency relief provision. Under the transportation bill, there's another section, a surface transportation block grant program that will allow monies, believe it or not, to include construction of docks and waterfront infrastructure projects. And yet another section, there is acronym PROTECT, which are always popular in Washington, which stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. And what all that means is there would be a supplemental formula in a competitive grant program to help states improve resiliency of transportation infrastructure projects. And then finally, under that bill, there is a resilience program for a special emergency relief, and it requires the Federal Highway Administration to revise its emergency relief manual to broaden the definition of resilience so that communities can look for some of these ways like I've enumerated, deepening channels, improving drainage, increasing opportunities for opening up culverts and making them larger, raising bridges where necessary, to expand the definitions of what include resilience to help communities who too often find themselves in places like, unfortunately, our coast has, and Holden Beach in particular, with the storms we've had in recent years. On another note, just on August 13th, the U.S. Economic Development Administration, as we all know is EDA, announced that it's now accepting applications from eligible entities, which include local governments that serve communities impacted by Hurricanes Florence and Michael, as well as other natural disasters in the last 2 years, 2018, 2019, can be used for a wide variety of activities related to disaster recovery, including economic recovery strategic planning and public works construction assistance. It's going to be a flexible resource. It generally expects to fund up to 80% of the eligible cost. In some cases, up to 100%. These will be competitive grants. Ironically, for once, there is not an application deadline stated yet, and they are willing to accept applications on a rolling basis and evaluate them as they come in. So we have a link in our report that we submitted to you at the bottom of page 5. In fact, it's the very last word on that page where it says more information can be found here. And we're happy to talk further with your town manager and town staff about possibilities if they decide to look at some of these potential areas to consider. But we're excited that there are some national programs now that are doing some things. There's not much of a silver lining when we have horrible storms like we've all experienced recently, but finally when government takes notice because of the pounding that we've received, sometimes you finally get pushed into action like these bills reflect. So there is a note of optimism that there is some bipartisan cooperation on moving on these threats that affect everybody, no matter what their background. If they live in a place that's threatened, everybody's threatened. Now, to become more specific, with the programs that we've been working on for Holden Beach, we all know that when we were here in May, we were on the verge of the Disaster Relief Act, additional supplemental appropriations being passed. Congress thought it was going to pass Memorial Day weekend. It got delayed by one situation that came up with one member, and then it got delayed yet again. They could not get unanimous consent to pass it in their absence during the Memorial Day recess, so they had to wait till the first full week in June to pass it. But after that got passed, finally, we started looking forward to some announcements to be made in terms of how the awards were going to come out under the Disaster Relief Act. We were all anticipating that to occur by the end of August, which is the end of next week. And just in recent days, the Corps has now stated it needs additional time. It may make some announcements in different categories, but they're not going to roll out an announcement of every single award at one time. So the town should not be concerned if we don't hear something like we had all hoped by the end of this month. It looks like it's going to be, quote, several more weeks, and they have not defined how many more weeks several includes. But I think in a way to appease the concern about that, they said, well, as we go through categories of needs, we will make announcements in those categories and roll that out. And that is yet to be determined. They haven't said which category they're going to announce first. So that is somewhat frustrating, but I think the Corps has been petitioned and hit in so many different ways. They want to make sure that they examine all the facts and hopefully get this right. And we will say thank you to the Wilmington District Office, the regional office down in Atlanta, and the Corps headquarters, all of whom we have met with this year, all of whom we have stayed in touch with. We know they are trying to work with us. Now, in just the past month, mid-July, we were back in Washington working with our congressional delegation to advocate for the Holden Beach concerns. To summarize, in July, we worked with our congressional delegation to secure 2 support letters for the request, the letter of intent that we previously discussed when we were here in May and that we've updated you on in June and July in our monthly reports. The first letter was a joint letter from Senators Burr and Tillis and Congressman Rouser urging the Corps to direct investigation funding to North Carolina specifically, because I know in particular the 2 senators and of course Congressman Rouser supporting the House, they have focused on North Carolina getting help. And they wanted to make sure that these investigations were done, and if studies were granted, they would be at no cost to the local communities. And I know that's a topic y'all have been talking about and may well talk about tonight and as you consider going forward in the future. The other letter, we worked with our delegation on that, both senators' offices and Congressman Rouser's office. The other letter that we worked directly with Congressman Rouser's office on was to the Corps, and it's very specific to Holden Beach, and supporting funding Holden Beach's request to make sure that the town has the opportunity to pursue a core feasibility study. There was also another letter we sent to the Corps expressing the town's strong interest in pursuing a core feasibility study as well. We know the Corps has been down here and has met with you all. We know that we have been working with the Corps behind the scenes as well. As I said earlier, on the district level, on the regional level, the South Atlantic Division as it's called officially, and up at the Corps headquarters in Washington. All 3 of these letters that I've described now that have gone forward have been with key contacts at the South Atlantic Division and Corps headquarters. Also, we have been staying in regular contact with our congressional delegation to make sure that we're pushing every button and that everything is in front of the Corps as they're making these decisions in the next several weeks, as they have stated. What does it mean in entering into agreement? I know that in your last meeting, we were careful, and the Ferguson Group joined us with its legislative research angle to make sure, as we listened to the actual audio recording of your last meeting, to make sure we were up to date in preparation to be with you tonight as well, to make sure that the town of Holden Beach is comfortable with this decision about going forward in terms of plans for the future. First of all, just to clarify and make sure we are all on the same page, by entering into an agreement with the Corps to carry out a feasibility study regarding the Holden Beach component of the Brunswick County Beaches Project, which you know was originally approved in 1966 and 1997, had the general reevaluation report done, and then we know in 2001 Ocean Isle broke off from that particular project. The town will not lose its eligibility to receive FEMA funding for any post-disaster beach renourishment just by having the feasibility study done. The only way FEMA funds would not be available to the town if you proceed on this would be if all these elements are met. The feasibility study first has been done, and it's found to be technically feasible, economically justified, and environmentally acceptable. Those are the 3 components of considering a study. Then it would have to be signed off by the chief in the engineer's office. Then the project would have to be provided new construction funding. And then finally, the project would have to be successfully constructed. So unless all four of those elements are met, and another storm comes, you're gonna be eligible for FEMA money. So there's no change there. You'd be as eligible then as you are now. It would only be after a project goes to full construction and is successfully completed, would the definition then shift to it being a core constructed project. And at that point, if there were a storm, then it would be on the Corps' approved list, and the Corps would be the one fighting for the town to make sure that it got money for its constructed project that the Corps had done. So that is where the change would occur. And so then the question is, okay, well then, where does this leave us with cost share? And I just want to close out this portion by making sure we're on the same page on that. With a core feasibility study, right now, under this Disaster Relief Act that just passed right at the beginning of June that we were talking about earlier tonight, if the Corps will approve Holden Beach's feasibility study request as it relates to what has been submitted through the letter of intent, then it'll be at no cost to Holden Beach. And Holden Beach doesn't have to accept it. I mean, they can do the study and you say, no, we don't think we want it, just stay like you are. So there's no risk here. The town does not have to, because of the way Congress set this supplemental appropriation for Disaster Relief Act, it has these supplemental appropriations to be at 100% federal expense. Normally, that is done at a 50-50 rate. But under this supplemental appropriation of the Disaster Relief Act, it's done at 100% paid for by federal government. Okay, that's just for the feasibility study by the Corps. Then, if you go to Corps project construction, then for the construction, it's cost shared at 65-35. That is 65 federal, 35 non-federal. How that 35 is divided up between you and the county and the state, I mean, different communities work out arrangements, but the feds would be paying 65%. And it's always possible that Congress could actually approve a cost share waiver if there is a future disaster. Congress has been known to take action like that when they realize how severe a disaster is. They have not always done that. I don't want to say anything, to guarantee that. They may or they may not, but Congress has that liberty to do that, and that would, of course, be a situation that have to be dealt with depending on the severity of the storm and what Congress would do. All right, so you've got the study that is at no cost, it's 100% federal. Then if you do go forward with a construction project, that would be 65-35. Then after that, if you get a construction project done by the Corps, then you get the benefit of over a 50-year period. There is the maintenance of the beach renourishment project, depending on if it's a 3-year cycle, 5-year, up to 10 years, depending on how good the job is and what the damage is. But with the renourishment, that's at 50-50. Used to be 65-35. Congress, has moved toward 50-50. And you would have ongoing maintenance and construction that the federal government would be paying half the cost. So you wouldn't be out on your own dime saying, oh, we're gonna go do it ourselves, then petitioning the state of North Carolina or petitioning at some point in the future the federal government, please come back and give us some money for this, or please help us out. It would be at a 50-50 as it's currently set up. For years, it's been at 65-35, and as we know, places like Carolina Curie Beach project and Wrightsville Beach, they're hitting that 50-year. They're coming up on it. Their projects were at 65-35, but we know since 1999, the federal government has been moving toward a 50-50 share on maintenance once you get a beach renourishment construction project in place. Then, if there is a disaster or a storm, a core project, let's say you're successful, you get a beach renourishment project, you get them to maintain it, then in the future, if there's a disaster, repairs to core constructed beach projects that are damaged during a storm are eligible for 100% federal funding to restore them at their pre-storm profile. So if you have an ongoing renourishment project and it's been going on and the storm comes and wipes it out, or wipes out a third of it or 2/3 of it, whatever part, federal government at 100% cost would come in and put it back to where it was. They won't come in and add additional, but they'll come back and put it back to where you were. They'll restore it at 100%. So that's another advantage of being under a core project direction. Then, with regard to FEMA post-disaster activities, as you know, FEMA public assistance. It's typically cost shared, currently 75-25. There are certain times and certain categories that Congress will allow, depending on the severity of the storm, depending on what category the repairs fall in. But Congress has increased the federal cost share to as much as 90 or even 100% for certain categories of funding in a FEMA post-disaster activity. So that kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at for where you are right now. To get the feasibility study done, you could be in a better position in the aftermath of the storm. To go ahead, the letter of intent has been sent. We know that the Wilmington District Office has said that they believe that we're right, what we are advocating for on your behalf, what they have heard you discuss, what we were all on the same page, that we need to make sure that Holden Beach moves forward. Whether or not, Oak Island, Castle Beach, they were part of that Brunswick Beaches report. Ocean Isle was, they broke off and went on with what they wanted to do in 2001. We know you're ready to go, and the Corps knows it, and the Corps is sold on that on the Wilmington District level. The South Atlantic Division Office in Atlanta has heard it loud and clear from us, and through seeing the letters that have now gone out by the congressional delegation, and the letters and correspondence we have had with them, and now we know Corps headquarters in Washington has heard it. And whether or not they, put you under that feasibility project is now being determined over the next, quote, several weeks. But we believe you're in the strongest position as you could be in. And that's the silver lining to having gone through these terrible storms. We certainly stand by you. You are the ones we're representing, and we will do the bid at the pleasure of this town commission. We just want you to know where we are currently in light of the atmosphere in Washington and in light of specifically what's being done with the Corps. And with that, I don't know if, Roger, if you have any additional comments or if the town manager does. If not, we thank you for this opportunity to bring you up to date. And if you have any questions, we certainly stand by ready to answer now. Or if it's a more detailed question, we're ready to stand by and get you a more detailed answer depending on what the privilege and the wishes of the council.
Commissioners, you got a question?
Yeah, I mean, I had a meeting, Joe and I had a meeting with David last Friday. We discussed this, actually, and I think he gave you a heads up that we were asking these questions, and I certainly appreciate all the information. You answered most of our questions. But I think we're going to have to, enlist your continued assistance to, if we come up with other questions. We have a Inlet and Beach Protection Board that will probably dive into it a lot deeper, and hopefully we'll be able to, get assistance from you and get information from you as we proceed and with our due diligence and understanding, what the GR project means to Holden Beach. So.
Holden is in a unique position. The two senators know that their job is for the entire state. Congressman Rousel knows his job is for this district, just as I did when I had that privilege to work with you all in that capacity. But even out of the 8 projects statewide that would be eligible for funding, Holden Beach is the only one that's had this general revaluation report done, except for a watershed project. But as far as the beaches go, out of the 8 projects, one of them is a watershed, the other one is Holden, that have had the GR done. The other 6 have not. So that again puts us in a prime position. Now, we hope, Lord willing, that the Corps will do what's right and that we'll be able to move forward and that all these things that we set up will go as we hope they will. But that's why we got to keep pushing every button, and that's why we're willing to continue these meetings, communications, phone calls, emails, whatever it takes to follow up. And we encourage you to do the same whenever you have an opportunity to talk to one of your senators or their staff. And I know they have regional staff and district staff as well as your congressman. I would continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I voiced my opinion. We're also in a unique position because we just did a big project ourselves a couple of years ago,
Yes,
right?
right,
So we
Central
have to understand how that
Yeah.
works with, this new initiative.
Yeah,
And how that,
sure.
the give and take of that, and understand,
Yeah.
the difference with leaving that or, continuing with that or not.
Sure.
But I think,
Sure. That's
we have to do our due diligence, and the information that you can provide would be invaluable, including the Army Corps of Engineers. We talked to them, including staff as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, you gave A lot of information, I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I commend your town staff, your town manager, and all the other ones. We know that we talk often to the town manager, assistant manager, in depth about these on a
Thanks.
regular basis in much more detail as well. But that's one reason we give you the reports, and another reason we thought now would be a good time to come back before you.
Good.
Congressman, we had a representative in the Corps come and talk to us, and my feeling was, when she left, was that the funding for the Corps was sort of precarious. It would come in a bulk, and then it would go to Atlanta, and Atlanta would decide which of the applicants might get the money.
That's right.
If you had to, with your experience in the Congress, can you tell, which is more likely to have a funding problem? FEMA, longer term for us, or the Corps projects? Which one is more likely to fall short and not have the money to do our project? Even though we're in the system, we've gotten ourselves away from FEMA, if we're in now with the Corps, are we more likely to come up short with them than we would be staying with FEMA?
Yeah, that's because Congress operates on a year-to-year basis in terms of its annual appropriations. That's a crystal ball question. I mean, I wish if I could answer that, I'd probably be in a different business. Because, but it's hard to predict because when we all know when Congress is in session, anything's likely to happen. FEMA, I will say this, FEMA, when I was in Congress and post 9/11, of course, FEMA was moved under the Department of Homeland Security and was given another emphasis because of what was the concerns were, and that making sure that there would be an emphasis in terms of FEMA. Now that all the storms have occurred, the horrible storms we've had in our country, not only in our area but across, in other places in the country, there's a real focus on FEMA. But by the same token, there is more emphasis now on the Corps of Engineers than there's been in a long time because they realize that these projects don't survive or you don't have the protection. You can't always just have FEMA coming back to clean up. You got to have protection up front, which was always the argument I would make through the years after those storms of Fran, Bertha, and Floyd, for those of you who remember those storms in the late 90s. Suddenly, the Carolina Curie Beach project and the Wrightsville project became examples to the nation about why a few $100,000 at that time, leisure nourishment saved millions and millions on the backside after a storm. And you got FEMA having to come in to literally clean up the mess because in other places because they didn't go forward with core constructive projects and trying to protect and maintain those projects. So it's really, it's hard to predict in the future. I would just say, push every button you can. And that's what we're trying to do. You wanna add
Excuse me,
something to
could I
that?
just ask that same question in a different way?
Sure.
Are you aware of any projects that the Corps did that weren't funded to do the repairs if there was a subsequent storm?
That weren't funded, you said?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not off the top of my head, we could research that. I mean, I don't have a list.
I'm just saying, because if the Corps does the repair, that's the same as getting reimbursed by FEMA. If they have never, if you're not aware of any instances where the Corps didn't do repair work following a disaster, that's, to me, that's 6 of one or half a dozen of that's the same as FEMA.
The difference is what happens in the interim, though. If you don't have a storm, the feds are paying 50% of your ongoing beach maintenance.
Oh, no,
Whereas you're not getting that money at all if you don't have
No,
a storm. You have to
I
wait
got
till you
you.
get a storm and then FEMA
No,
comes in.
I got you.
And historically, my past life, I was on the Hill a long time ago, 26 years ago, but I was an associate staff person for the Energy and Water Subcommittee, for the Appropriations Committee, and so the Energy and Water, which Congressman McIntyre said earlier, has responsibility for the Corps of Engineers and other water agencies. And he's over that period of time, the last 40-plus years, I've never seen a situation ever where the Corps has not had its funding needs met in a post-disaster situation. I mean, there's always the debate about, do we take the money out of budget? And in most instances, Congressman McIntyre will remember, I mean, it's, those, a lot of these monies get taken off budget, and so they make it easier to approve those post-disaster commitments. And, we've never, Congress and the Corps really have never been in a situation where they have not been able to meet those requirements. There may have been a delay, again, in terms of getting monies appropriated, but that same delay frankly faces FEMA, faces the Corps, faces other agencies that have disaster responsibilities.
So to put it another way, because the debate that we've been having here is whether we're losing FEMA. And from what you just said, it's as if the Corps just substitutes for FEMA, and they will eventually take care of the rebuild after a disaster.
Right, and again.
Is that
as
fair?
Congressman That is absolutely fair, and as Congressman McIntyre said, again, when you have a core constructed project, once that's done, then the repairs are done at 100% federal responsibility. There's no requirement, no 25% cost share as you have to commit to the FEMA money, if you're in a FEMA situation. So it's 100% federal.
And
To
if I can,
restore it to the prior profile.
if I can piggyback on Roger's statement there, the 75-25 that he's referring to as far as the FEMA money, remember, North Carolina is the only state that does the 25% match. So the 75% is federal money from FEMA, and the state of North Carolina is the 25 on the beach fixes, if you will.
Yeah, as a follow-on to that, have you a feeling for the state and the county position on that matter? Are they likely to diminish the amount of support they give for that sharing?
Yeah, they're Christian.
Leave it to the local people to do?
That would be another one if we could see a crystal ball on that. I will say this to the folks that I know and work with, in our state legislature, in the executive branch, legislative branch, they're extremely conscientious about, and this is regardless of party, I'm not talking about any of that, I'm talking about just public service. They are extremely conscientious about, post-disaster. And yes, there's debates about when it's gonna happen and how. I'm not addressing any of those particulars, but I'm just saying in terms of the state fulfilling its obligation, I know that they desire very much to do that. Now, future legislatures, future changes in the legislative or executive branch, I couldn't dare answer for them. But I know that those who are trying to help now post these storms we recently had, that they want to try to help. But folks, that ultimately, I can say this, having been blessed with that opportunity, you've got to stay in touch with your elected officials, and which is what we're doing. I've already cited letters that we've been working on even in the last 3 days, but this goes beyond writing letters. It's the constant. Those letters are a culmination of the meetings we've had, the email exchanges, the phone conferences, the discussions with your fine town staff, going through the nitty-gritty details, which would take us far too long to go into all those details here at this forum. But they know about what we're working on. So, but there's no substitute ultimately for them hearing directly from the constituents. And so any chance you get to follow up with your state legislators on the state share, or your federal legislators on the federal share, do it. Do it, especially with next year being an election year. They better be listening, and we all know that. And it's important that they always hear from you, and I'll continue that. And they're hearing from us a lot, and they know that we're advocating, and that's why it's been good we've gotten this far, just in this year, to be in a position with a letter of intent. And now we've got the opportunity, because the Corps is going to have a plan of work behind this disaster supplemental. Then they're going to get their regular annual appropriations Corps plan of work. So there'll be another shot at trying to get help for Holden Beach, and we're already working on that, regardless of whether or not there even been a hurricane relief bill. But boy, we've got an extra opportunity now. We're trying to capitalize on this disaster relief money, and then also be looking ahead to what's right behind it, and that's the regular Corps plan of work that they have to do. And we have to go to not only Wilmington District, who've been very cooperative, but we have to go through South Atlantic Division, Atlanta again, and through Corps headquarters, as we've already done twice in person this year. So we're staying on it.
I just have a question. The core structured projects would only include the Central Reach area of the island, correct?
Roger, David, you want to speak to that?
No, sir, that's not correct. It's the GRR is pretty much the length of the island. It's not just limited to the Central Reach project.
All right, well, maybe I'm just confused because we had, I can't remember the individual's name, but from the Corps.
Christine Brayton.
Yeah, very, very sharp gal, and she really worked extremely well with us. And by the way, right up front, what I need to say is thank you for your time and the efforts and the information that you're providing this evening.
Yes, sir.
It's really great information, new information, and as you can see, we're very thirsty for information.
Could I make
And
a Inlet hazard area, David? It would exclude the inlet hazard area,
Yeah,
is
that's
that
what I'm
correct?
telling, yeah.
Areas?
Yeah.
Right, Joe's question was, is it just the Central Reach project?
The answer is no,
That's
correct.
negative.
But it wouldn't go inlet to inlet, it would go hazard area to hazard area. Inlet
That's
hazard area.
correct.
Right.
That's why we don't like the new inlet hazard areas.
Right,
Correct, okay, yeah, and,
okay.
thank you.
I would make one observation.
Or the
The
proposed.
two of you look much more comfortable tonight. That's right. You look more like one of us. That's right. Thank you for all that you do.
Yes,
Okay.
God bless you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
He was the first one I saw.
Mike looks handsome, yeah. We look comfortable, he looks handsome, yeah. Thank you. Chief Dixon.
Good evening.
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 So, can I just tell you that I am happy that July is behind us. We had a busy month in July. You can see from the reports. We answered 438 service calls. It was a busy month for us. 4th of July, of course, a lot of fireworks, things like that. Ordinance complaints was a big number, 63, as you can see there. If you'll flip over to the next page, the incident reports that we answered this month. We had 10. There was a few larcenies from construction sites. Boomer's Rental had a bike stolen, small stuff, nothing too extreme. The Home Beach property owners, West End gate down there got damaged.
Yep.
So there was a few reports there. Next page, ordinance violation summary, seems to be a hot topic, which I know we'll get into on 8A. We answered, well, out of the 63 ordinance complaints, we issued 91 charges for violations. Most of those were parking. There was a couple here which I would actually need to do some research on and figure out why the officers did not specify a charge when they put it in the computer. It's probably a handwritten ticket. When they went back in, they just didn't click the button to put which charge it was. And then state citations on the next one was 42. Several speeding, drive while license revoked, these things like that. Then the last page, which is what I really wanted to talk to everyone about tonight, is just a little public service announcement. As, I feel like I'm trying to figure out which way to call it. As we are approaching hurricane season this year, we're getting to the heart of it. I know it's been here for a little while. We've had 2 named storms, luckily have not come this way. I hope we make it through the rest of the year without one. But the town issues an order. There's the government, the North Carolina General Statutes says that the government can impose curfews, evacuation orders, et cetera, et cetera. If we do that, it is for your safety. If we ask you to leave or we ask you to stay on your property, it is for your safety. There's a reason we're doing it. And it is a Class 2 misdemeanor to violate that. So it's not something to play with. It's a real serious offense in North Carolina. It's a Class 2 misdemeanor. We don't want to go that route, but I just want everyone to know that it is. So if you're ordered to evacuate or if a curfew is ordered during a hurricane, please heed to those warnings, listen to the times, evacuate the area, or stay on your property as you're told to do. It's for everyone's sake. That's my 2 cents on the police report. If you have questions, comments, or concerns on the police report, I'll be glad to answer them. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns on the parking, if we'll wait, do those on the next item, I would appreciate that.
I just have a question.
Yep, and I'm sorry, Mr. Jody, this
Okay.
gentleman did raise his hand first. Yes,
These golf carts that are running 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, and there's a yellow line, would your guys write a ticket if somebody passed the golf cart? It's going like 10 or 15 miles an hour.
I would tell you technically, if it's a no passing zone, they're entitled to the same rights as any other vehicle. So, during July, it's definitely not a good idea. December, if you're the only vehicle on the road, I can't give you permission, but it's a different story than, you know. But yes, they're entitled to the same rights. If they're driving on the road, they've got tags on it, that is a motor vehicle. So you have to do it just like you would any other motor vehicle. Mr. Joe?
Yeah, added a 23 parking in the right-of-way. Was that a 23 in the right-of-way? Were there any tickets issued in the municipal parking lots after 2 AM to 5 AM? We have nine municipal parking lots.
I could probably, I would have to go through them
Okay.
individually.
Fine.
I don't know the answer to that. I would tell you that from what I've heard back from the community, the majority of them are from side streets, not from municipal parking areas.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
but I can't give you a hard number on that. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on the police report itself?
Well, when it's written up in the Beacon, it's written up as incidents, 300 incidents on Old Beach. It sounds like we're in a crime wave here. I wish there was a better word,
There's,
a different word.
I understand what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's what it sounds like. It
It's-
sounds
yeah.
like,
When we print it out, it should just say activity log as it does here. It shows events. We call them service calls. I'm not sure why they print them out as incident reports. The incident reports, we give them as 10 that we brought in here.
make that clear. It sounds
Luckily, we are not crime ridden right now.
like that's
It's very good.
Yeah, maybe the next time you talk to him, you could point that out.
I will
Okay.
definitely do that. And honestly, since Lindsay has
Yeah.
left us, I'm not even sure, I've not had much contact with.
I don't think we have anybody here.
But I will follow up on that. Yes, absolutely. I'm done with the police report, so if you want to move to the next, I'll sit down or I'll stay up here for this. Tell me
You
how
better
y'all want
sit
to do
down.
that. Sit down?
Yeah, let the commissioners, we'll call you, sir.
Yes,
Thanks.
Keep your
Thank
gun,
you.
keep your gun handy.
thank you, appreciate it.
All righty. 8A,
Thank you.
parking ordinance.
Thank you. I'd first like to go through the paragraph K. The original paragraph K was, and it's been worded already, the previous ordinance, it said, "It shall be a violation of this chapter to leave standing any portion of a vehicle in a lawful parking area for a period exceeding 72 consecutive hours." What we decided to do, or the town decided to do, and the commissioners decided to do, was to revise that paragraph. And I think one of the issues that I had problems with in going back and researching some of my older information from a year ago was this term public. Sometimes we use the term public for different things. And I found myself saying originally a year ago, over a year ago, the designated public parking areas. Well, what is a designated public parking area? So I've learned since, David's done a good job of keeping me intact, as well as Tim, that we have municipal designated parking lots or parking areas, however you want to say it. And then we have the right-of-way, as we know. And yes, true, we did discuss the right-of-way, and for those folks that wanted to protect their property or prevent people from parking on it, that we have numerous residents on the island that have put up this small fence, rope and chain, or that keep people off their property. So I think we did a good job of taking care of that ordinance. Where I'm still kind of hung up on is this definition, the definitions between public, municipal, and as a result of that, I went through and I found something that I wrote. David and I had a meeting on July, and David, if I'm wrong in any way, correct me, please. July 12, 2018, we met together to discuss the 2 a.m., 5 a.m., no vehicle parking in public parking locations. Again, I used the word public, and that's probably an error that I made in saying public, when I should have said municipal public parking lots. We have 9 of them in the town. David was so gracious enough that he also said that, agreed based on, that David had an idea to identify 2 types of parking. There is currently on-street right-of-way parking, and the other is off-street parking. The 9 parking lots on the island. The suggestion identified is to add a section in one of the ordinance that states no parking from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. in these 9 parking lots. We can call them municipal parking lots, we can call them parking lots, but I have to refrain from using the word public. This addition would eliminate the off-street, side street, 2 a.m., 5 a.m. parking restriction. So that would take away the ticketing of the 2 a.m., 5 a.m. on the right-of-way. Then I went back into my February 20th, 2018 document, and I found a number of different interesting things. But apparently I kept saying that no overnight parking in public parking spaces, when I should have said municipal parking spaces. But I did reference the 9 lots, the nine municipal parking areas that we had. And I think that's what probably prompted Tim in his meeting that night to advise us that signage of $30 apiece for the 9 areas would be put in place for no parking in the municipal parking lots from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. The whole intent, and the intent that I said last month, and I'm sorry I didn't carry the conversation on further, the original intent was for the municipal parking lots, which I referred to as public parking areas. So I'll take the hit on that one. But it's the 9 municipal parking lots where we want to prevent parking from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay.
I had the same conclusion, and I thought from the very first that we weren't going to be giving owners of homes citations for parking in their driveway in the right-of-way down by the street, or parking on the lot next door. That was my understanding. If I'm wrong, I was wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, but I thought real clearly we weren't going to be penalizing residents for parking overnight in their yard or in the house next door. I thought clearly it was municipal parking lots. That just, and if not, I think it ought to be that way, but maybe we have to do something about that.
My recollection is that we had a robust discussion, and Wally was the chief at that point, and Wally assured us that his people could differentiate. And so the discussion we had was, would you prefer someone to park underneath the bridge, or do you want him parking alongside your house at 2 o'clock in the morning listening to his radio? We decided as a group that we didn't want them parking in the right-of-way next to somebody's home. And that's why we asked the attorney to draft the language to limit it between 2 and 5 o'clock. Now, I also asked the attorney about posting signs, because I don't think it's fair to issue summonses if they're not notified, they're not proper notice. But we discussed it. It's all, if you go back and look at all of the discussion we had, it's all there. And we knew exactly what we may have made a mistake, but we knew exactly what we were voting on, and we were voting so that people weren't going to park in the right-of-way. That's what we voted for. If we want to change that, then we should forget what we did and decide what we want to do. My suggestion would be, if you want to do it right, and you don't want people parking in your right-of-way at night, you only want the people who rent, then we should give a sticker. Plenty of towns, residents can park in an area where visitors can't, or people who pay for rent. But you're not going to do that in the next month. We can do that for next year, and we can ask the police department to take that into consideration until this summer season is over, right? We have 2 weeks to go.
That was a question I would have. Can we, in fact, suggest to the police?
Police
don't enforce-
department can
don't
use
enforce
discretion,
this-
right, chief?
We do have,
You have discretion.
we do have discretion, that is correct.
Well, that's what we had an understanding with Wally too, but that didn't
But-
pass along for
But what
some reason. No, you know, no
But
disrespect
if
to the
we-
chief, but
I just hate to do things piecemeal, right?
Yep.
We did it, we discussed it, we talked about it. It's not working out the way we hoped. I have no problem changing it, but let's do it right.
Good.
So that next year, we don't have the problem.
I would agree with that, but I would suggest that we ask the police to be really careful
in
not
the
to,
meantime, right.
not to hammer residents who have to have, you know,
I-
they're clearly
I
not
think the
people
chief's
who
got
are,
the message.
who are hanging overnight. They're not hangouts, they're not people in the car and,
Go ahead, David.
No problem.
Gonna be hard to identify residents versus visitors. That's not something that we should even attempt to
No,
do.
no.
but if it's a vacant car, I don't think they're playing music overnight in my yard. And if I've parked in my neighborhood's right next door lot, and the car's there and nobody's in it, nobody's playing the radio, I don't see it being an issue. But I think we could sort that out somehow, but,
Well, in the meantime, you know, I'm gonna say it once again, you know, as far as I was concerned, what we agreed to do was the municipal parking lots only.
No,
That's not true.
Well, it's,
It's not.
that's
might-
what you
may
say,
have
that's what I
thought
say.
that.
No,
I think in the meantime, they could focus on the municipal lots
Yeah.
I have no problem with that.
and then not do the others in the meantime while we resolve it.
I would caution the board to be directing the chief on how to enforce ordinances. I think that if there's a desire to amend the ordinance to achieve that end state, where is to task the staff to develop an ordinance that would achieve your end state of demarking the 9 municipal lots and delineate that right-of-way parking is okay, something generally to that effect. But to be directing the chief of police on how to enforce the ordinance is improper.
Okay, and I'm going to go back, because I don't want residents to be penalized, but Mike is absolutely right. We had a long discussion about right-of-way parking, because it's not easy in off-season in particular, when you have cars parking in a right-of-way, and it's allowed overnight, and that's when we end up with people on the island who are sussing places out, or there's thievery. So I agree there needs to be a way to fix this, but I don't think that going to municipal lots is the way to address it. I mean, I've been going through, and I've had a few emails with the town manager to give him an idea of what I'm thinking about, but it's more after season, to find a way so that residents have a way of identifying that it's their car, that they're parking in their right-of-way, and how we handle visitors when there's too many cars for a parking area at a house is another one that's got to be addressed. But what I worry about as we go into off-season, if suddenly right-of-way parking is game again, because it wasn't only about people protecting their property from cars parking on it, damaging their landscape. It had to do with security, too. If we go into off-season and we've done away with that, are we running the risk of having more cars moving down the island and parking overnight, and again, sussing places out for possible thievery? I'd like to see this done with a real discussion, and a quick discussion, that we try to fix it right and not have to then go back in a couple months, and now we have to put it back in place. I think we can gather our thoughts, and at the September meeting, everybody bring their ideas, and the staff, of how we can achieve what we want to and not penalize property owners who need to park in the right-of-way when they have extra family and extra cars there.
I like David's idea of the staff
Yeah. I
putting
like that.
something together for us that kind of brings it home for us. I I'm especially empathetic with residents who get this, have a problem and get a ticket. When I look at the 11-bedroom house on Ocean Boulevard, every single night, there are 4 or 5 cars parked in the right-of-way where it's illegal parking on Ocean Boulevard. And I haven't seen a ticket on one of them. I see lots and lots on my street, Yacht Watch Drive, people parking all over the place with no tickets, and all of a sudden, I'm getting too many calls from homeowners that feel like they've been picked out for some reason and given a ticket. So if the town can come some better that we can deal with at the next meeting, I think that'd be very healthy.
Do we need to do that in a motion?
Madam Clerk?
No?
I think,
Okay.
are we in agreement with that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
think-
Madam Clerk,
maybe
do we
can you
need
do that?
anything?
And if you need to talk to some of us individually, or especially Mike, who was involved, and Joe were involved in the original, to make sure we interpret it correctly.
I would feel more comfortable if the board had a consensus that my understanding is that to prepare draft, to have draft ordinance language prepared that would in essence identify and make it okay, identify the 9 municipal lots and make it not okay for parking 2 to 5, and that right-of-way parking from 2 to 5 is okay. As far as a starting point to
I agree with
prepare
that.
some type of
I don't know.
document.
That is
Well,
not.
I do because I can, in fact, protect my private lot. I can put a
Yes,
fence
but
up, and that stops
let me
anybody from
just
doing
say,
it.
let me just say, I don't think that's what we want to do, and I'll tell you why. Because if you rent your home, somebody they want to park in it. So I think what we want to do, David, and
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, is we want to allow renters to park in the right-of-way because they're paying for the house, and we want the owner to be able to park in the right-of-way. So we don't want to allow anybody to park in the right-of-way, but we're going to give somebody a sticker, identify that they have permission. to
Some
park in the
mechanism to
right-of-way.
do
Right?
that.
That's what we want.
Right.
I think that's what we need is the ideas of what are possible mechanisms that identify cars that it's okay to be in the right-of-way because they either are renting or they're residents, and then they can park on their property. What are the possible mechanisms that could work?
I don't know, you,
What do you,
If you're renting your property, you should have enough parking
I
places
agree.
that are not in the right of way to park.
so then your idea would be to limit the sticker to just residents?
So what I'm saying is that you just used the example somebody did of having too many cars.
Yep.
He's got 11 parking places. Believe it or not, there's 11. We checked 15 times because everybody complains. We make sure on every site plan that you have enough parking that required by the ordinance for your house. We get complaints every day that people have too many people at their house and they're parking either at their house or parking on their vacant lots or parking where they're not supposed to be. So the only thing I'm saying is that you may be all working in the right direction for what you want, but you're focusing on all these other areas. One is right-of-way usage, and that stuff that we did with the right-of-ways had nothing to do really with parking, had everything to do with protecting your property. So it had nothing to do with parking.
right.
The lots and parking in the right-of-way, trying to figure out a way to let people park in there if they have too many people. You know what I mean, is really an argument against your own ordinance. And the ordinance says you have to have so much parking available outside of the right-of-way in order to have the structure. As a matter of fact, you agreed on an ordinance that's been sent to the town attorney who hasn't reviewed it yet, that talks about that very thing. So what I'm saying is that everybody has the right idea, but we need to go into like David's, we gotta go in there and find that section that helps with that. We're talking about prohibited parking, we're not talking about allowing parking. So you need to go into the prohibited section of the parking ordinance and say, this is prohibited here. You have a prohibited section already. What we did was, when we tried originally to get the 2 and 5 in there, we didn't put it in the prohibited section, we put it in another section.
Right.
And it should have been one page over in the chart where it says what's prohibited. And in municipal parking lots, it's prohibited to park from 2 to 5. It could have been on the next page. But what I'm saying is that you gotta let all this other stuff go, and focus on what you wanna do, which is prohibit parking in municipal parking lots from 2 to 5. And because you're going over, your discussion is losing your focus on what. Now, if your intent is to let people park with X amount, if they've got enough parking area in front of their house to have extra people over for parties and that kind of stuff, that's fine. But saying that a renter needs more parking places is outside the scope of where you take your ordinances, is what I'm saying. So, you know, if somebody wants to have a Christmas party, they want to have a family over, you know what I mean? Or they, you know what I mean? But we should really recognize that when you rent, you're supposed to have enough parking places. That's all. This is scary. But if you want to, you go over one page and you'll see what's prohibited, where it's you're prohibited from parking from 25 feet from intersection, from 100 feet from intersection. You're prohibited parking under the bridge, having a boat under the bridge. You can put in that same section, it's prohibited to park in municipal parking lots from 2 to 5 a.m., 2 a.m. to 5.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
But again, I understand everything, but the intent was not only to stop the overnight parking, but it was to ensure that people didn't park next to other people's houses overnight and sleep in their cars overnight. Right? That was why we had that's why we did that. So your suggestion now, that just goes back, we're almost back to the original discussions we were having. We can easily prevent the parking in the municipal lots, but then we could be forcing those people who use it, whether it's the fishermen who come at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, "Hey, Joe, you have the bait." Do you want to hear that? Or at 6 o'clock in the morning when they're coming back, talking about all the fish they caught. So we have that same problem. And if you want to throw up our hands and say it's fine to park in the right of way, then that's the option, or else it's to make the sticker so that only people who live there can do it.
Yeah, I mean, we're not belaboring, I don't think Mike and I mean to belabor this, but there was a lot of discussion about, are we just pushing the problem, if there's a problem, onto Brunswick Avenue and Quentin and the streets like that? And how are the people gonna feel if the cars that would stay in the municipal lots from 2 to 5 for whatever reason? And I distinctly remember the concern about drugs being discussed. Are people gonna be happy if but it's okay to park on the side streets, which will be near the big municipal lot? So if that is no longer a concern of commissioners and the people who live in that neighborhood, then focusing on the municipal lots is fine, but we're, again, that was the discussion a year and some months ago.
Right, I agree, I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
But let's go back, just like you, just now y'all had a discussion. Every person on this island has an opportunity to stop people from parking next to their house if they want to.
Yes.
Why would the town need to be in the business when we've already wrote ordinance and put them in that business?
Because now I'm going to act as a spokesperson for the real estate business, right? Because if I'm renting my house, I want the people who come here to be able to park their cars, right? If I limit the parking for the renters, that's not good for business. One of the things we're always trying to do here is to balance the.
But we've limited the parking for the renters already. The ordinance says you can't have so many parking places per house.
Okay.
It's an interesting piece.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Grandpa and grandma rent a house, 4 bedrooms. they invite their 4 grandsons to come stay with them for a week. Each grandson drives their car because they come from 4 different colleges across the United States. Where do you want me to tell grandma and grandpa to tell their grandkids to park?
But if you're asking me, you'll remember,
Well, I'm
that's the argument I used when I described the big party at my mama's house.
Well,
When this came up, you're using the same argument I did.
Well,
What I'm saying is that you gotta stay in the focus. If that's your focus, great. But you can't use stuff in the ordinance that's against what you're trying to do.
But I'm just saying, what do you, the town, want me to tell grandma and grandpa?
They live here or they're renting?
They're renting.
They'd have a problem.
I know it's a problem,
They'd
but I
have a
mean, I don't
problem.
know what to tell them. I mean, I've got a house down here on the second row in the 100 block that the homeowner's threatening to take the house away from me because of this parking crap. And,
Well, see,
Well,
Uh,
now,
well,
that's a
what-
that's great, but now look, here is the enforcement side of that, Alan, is that what do you tell the builder who wants to build a house, but he wants to take more room and not have enough parking areas, he wants to use the right of way?
well, I'm not arguing, I'm just asking for advice.
Because that's what'll come back to us.
The-
on this.
Because I have nowhere to send these cars.
I understand that. I understand that. I mean, there've been 11 cars at a house across the street from me that luckily has enough parking, but it's a 6 or 7 bedroom. It would have to have room for 6 or 7. It can accommodate 11, but these things happen. This is the reason that I think we actually have to have time and sit and go through everything that we're really trying to achieve and make sure we come out with
I agree.
what we want to do. Rather than just say, let's change it to the municipal lots, because that still doesn't solve your problem, Mr. Mayor. If it's a house on Ocean Boulevard, you can't tell them that they can park in the right-of-way of Ocean Boulevard for overflow. So if we would put the time in September to get everything on the table and try to solve it once and for all, wouldn't that be the best way to address this?
I think we're trying to do that, but David needs some direction to draft the language, right?
Well, he gave a suggestion, so, we didn't like his suggestion. In the meantime, can we put a moratorium on issuing tickets? No. Pardon me?
You strike the 2 to 5 language from the ordinance, which will then prevent the police department from enforcing that ordinance.
Yeah. That's,
But with an ordinance, I don't have an ordinance. They've discussed it before, it's not being first introduced, I think it's right tonight. But just strike that language.
Do we want to make it municipal for the next month and come back next month and agree that we're gonna solve this issue? I
agree with that.
really worry about going into off-season without the right-of-way situation overnight addressed, that we may get more.
They are separate issues, so
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I mean,
100%.
You can do municipal right now, clarify that,
deal with the rest.
and then develop some mechanism to handle the.
But we
the-
need to do that in September
Fair
as a
enough, fair enough. Yep,
priority.
Yep.
The one problem with what I just said is that it was not on tonight's agenda, so that the public does not have notice that you're considering making this decision and striking that language. It was added to the agenda, it wasn't in the packet. So Joe Q. Public, who has concerns about this, has had no opportunity to be heard during the public comment. I think the clerk's right. I apologize.
troublemaker.
Okay,
Troublemaker.
then we just deal with it all in September?
Are we ready to move forward?
Yeah, let's deal with it in
Yep.
September. But in the meantime, if anybody from the town has any ideas, suggestions, or that,
You can't officially tell.
I don't know. Whatever, move on.
Thank you.
I
Number 9, Mr. Clemmons.
Mr. Clemens is unable to join us tonight. I'll attempt to cover for him. The short story is that we are party to a multi-jurisdictional disaster debris agreement with Brunswick County. We piggyback on their contractor. They select, go through a RFP process and make a selection. We have an opportunity to piggyback on their new contract with a new disaster debris contractor. Which is, previously it was Crowder Gulf, and now they're going with Southern Disaster Recovery with a backup of Ceres Environmental. What we need from the board, I recommend that we piggyback on the county's selection. Otherwise, it's hurricane season and they don't have somebody haul the debris off. The county's changing contractors at this point in time, so I recommend that we, that the board approve this piggyback arrangement on this multi-jurisdictional disaster debris agreement.
Is there a motion?
And authorize the manager with, to execute the appropriate paperwork, subject to the attorney's review.
I make a motion to add the piggyback process, as David stated.
Is there a
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Number 10, Mr. Hewitt.
This is really the clerk's thing. Yeah, I'm sorry.
The MAPS group is ready to present to us their findings, so we need to come up with the date of the meeting. She gave me her availability for the last week in August and the first couple of weeks of September, so if you guys could provide me with your availability, we could schedule a special meeting to go over the information. So you could email it to me if that's the easiest.
Can you send out a note, please? Thank you.
Sure will.
Number 11, Mr. Evans.
Which one is 11?
Fire.
Fire.
Far, son, it's far.
With the lack of it, the lack of it.
Okay, I think it was at last board meeting, y'all tasked us with taking a look at the issue with people cooking on the beach, having flames on the beach. So what we did was, we went into the fire ordinance, and we had just amended that a couple of years ago. The fire ordinance was, and I think there might have been some issue there with when the stuff got codified, that particular ordinance didn't get into the new codification. So while it was on the website, it didn't make it into our regular ordinance books. With that said, we did an amendment to it. We went in, you can read the amendment. We basically put an exception in 91.17 and 17A, which we would like to discuss with the board because of a recent incident, but we added 91.18 that basically says all open and closed flame devices and cooking devices shall not be operated or put into use in any public areas or on private dunes. And the reason for that was there was concern for fire and for injury on the beach, and for many other things that could find their way out there, because we were starting to see such stuff. And other places have seen it too. I had a conversation, I won't say what beach it was, but someone took an entire cooking apparatus out on the beach. So I think this will kind of help us with that. The only thing I would like to add is this, I don't know if anybody's aware of it or not, but when we brought this ordinance to get it repaired back in 17, I think is when it was done, it was the planning department's wish that we could help maybe alleviate some of the cooking that was on the back decks and stuff. But during the subsequent, discussions, that got left in. There was good reason to leave it in and that kind of stuff. But I think Jeremy and them, we recently had a situation where we had a grill on the back deck on the second floor with no access. It was a deck that was accessed through the house.
Wow.
That caught on fire. And everybody knows that our houses are only 5 foot from the property line, and depending on what they built last weekend when I weren't here, it might even be closer. So, I would recommend, I mean, we can bring it back again if you want to, but I would recommend passing the ordinance as we have written it, or because it's on the agenda, that you may want to consider, striking 91.17, which is the exception that allows gas grills on these decks. Now, you might want to give that more thought because it was debated before, and there was some good debate, but I don't remember what it was, but it worked out that it stayed on there. I'm not sure, but staff did not put it in there. It was put back in there after our presentation. It was the wish of the board that we did. So, either way, I would recommend passing 91.18, but you could either strike that language, take it out, or we can bring it back and you can think about it. But I think that Jeremy's in agreement with me that it might be a good idea, and I can assure you that the fire department was one of the ones that pushed to get them off the get the grills off the decks before. It was the fire department that was pushing for it, so we added it into the language when we bought it the first time. So,
I mean, you could always add it back if there's, think of a reason.
Administratively, on an administrative note, depending on how the board wants to proceed, since 91.18 it is the change, my question would be, shouldn't that be the civil, added in the civil
I got
section?
my note here,
Okay.
Jeremy took
Okay.
me out the door and told me that we left it out. And we did, we inadvertently left it out. And that B1, it says in a criminal in accordance with 1099A of the Code of Ordinance, any person who violates any provision of 91.15, 91.16, and it should say 91.17 and 91.18 of this chapter, shall be subject to a fine. So if you could add 91.18.
But you were thinking ahead, we were going to eliminate 17, so 18 would turn into 17, right? So, no, I'm kidding.
Just read that out a few minutes ago. So, but David's right, it was left off, it should have been in that section.
What if we eliminate 17? What's the pleasure, everybody? Should we eliminate 17 and just put in 18, which would then be 17?
I'm not in favor of removing
Okay,
17.
I can go either way.
For the, just for the same thing, I understand that it could create a problem, but the problem is not that frequent, and people do come and they want the convenience of being able to barbecue without climbing from the third floor kitchen down to the ground floor to barbecue the hot dog.
Yep.
Yep.
So, for that reason, I would like to leave it the way it is.
I think that's why we agreed that we would leave
Yeah,
propane.
yeah, I'm okay with it.
So would we otherwise be asking to
Right.
approve
And the kitchens are-
91.18?
And the kitchen are usually on the third floor.
And you'll be doing what you asked me to bring to you.
Yep, fair enough, fair enough.
I move that we approve
Yes.
91.18.
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Unanimous. Moving right along.
Yeah. That's pretty much.
Mr. Evans, you want to stay there?
And do the next one?
Yes, sir. Number 12.
Okay, the next,
Six.
the next, this has all been generated since August of last year, 2018. If you remember when we were getting our flood ordinance done, I told you that there would be some house cleaning that we'd have to come back to later, but it was important for us to get it passed and get it done then. In the interim, some other things have happened. The new North Carolina Building Code came out, and they also have some alternate language which help change and structure some other things as well. But this will actually simplify it. We did a good job of simplifying the way we measure heights, and a good way of simplifying so that contractors and homeowners and people would know what's expected of them with our RFPE, which are regulatory flood protection elevation stuff. What this does is bring everything in to order with what we have. Our literature says, what this language now says, that we put out, all of our literature. The building code says that if you have certain conditions, then they'll have to be built to these standards. This puts it in order with that. Our floodplain management ordinance had language in it that required us to go out and find areas that met their requirements for CAS or coastal A zones, and then put the burden on us, and then required the homeowner for appeals. This eliminates any questions about that. So, adding this new language in D, the way it's written will help us. Now, there is some other language that we added. Language that we added for clarification and for protection for our citizens, and language that we added that we feel like is necessary to keep us from having to do things other places do. The language that we are adding, if we add it, is almost 420 points on your next CRS evaluation. The language that we are adding will make your insurance go down in the future, okay? We have petitioned, based on our other documentation that we had and the interpretation and the way we were enforcing it, to get credit for this on the last one. Now, I've not received any information back, but we did get from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, they agreed with me. North Carolina Department of Insurance agreed with me, and some of my colleagues agreed with me on certain language that the CRS is missing the boat, that the North Carolina Building Code now requires what they are saying people have to do, but yet they want it proven that it's done. This takes and puts the language where they like it, okay? It's already being done, it has to be done, but they want the language. So this guarantees that you get credit for it in the future. So for those of you, that was one of your goals, to lower the CRS.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, the language that we added, that's not part of it, of that stuff, is this. And this is stuff that I enforce for safety reasons, but now we're putting it in here so that it makes it simple for everybody. Most places in their ordinances do not allow but one, maybe two electrical devices, and they're basing that off of a recommendation from FEMA. That is just a recommendation. What we do here is that we require, you can have your electrical devices, because you gotta have them. You gotta have a light switch at the bottom of your steps, or else you're gonna die. You gotta have outlets at your pool, or else you're gonna kill somebody. What we've done is we've actually used our knowledge and what we know about these things, and we've written an ordinance that will allow people to have more than one outlet, because we do. They've been having them since I've been here. But I require them to put all of their safety devices above the floodplain, which means if you're standing in water and using it, it's already dead. If the device is being protected at the bottom, then you literally could get hurt really bad, because that means the wire is energized all the way to the device. The only thing that's protected is the device. So this language, what it does is make you put the GFCI in the breaker panel instead of at the plug. The plug don't kill the power. It just kills the power to the cord that you're plugging in, and it kills you. So if the plug's wet, the wire's wet, you know what I mean, you're not protected. So what we propose is that everything goes on the opposite side of the hazard like we do now, and everything be protected from above. Every electrician's already doing that on this beach, because we've been preaching it for years, and we've pretty much got it that way. But this puts it in the language for the guy that's coming from Fayetteville. That's what it does. The other thing is that Some other municipalities are requiring people to put their meter bases up on platforms because it's a recommendation of FEMA. Doesn't get you any insurance points, doesn't get you anything, any special. We're not, what we're saying is here, and when you do that, by the way, that means the meter base, if they just put a meter base on and put a back-to-back service in the house, I know I'm talking weird here, but then that means that there is a 200 amp wire, depending on how far they consider back-to-back in their jurisdiction, maximum's 5 feet, that has no protection. Okay, now you gotta remember that the electrical wires that's feeding that house is under the ground, the transformer's underground, the pipes coming up the house, the wires in the pipe, all that's unprotected. The only thing protecting it is Brunswick Electric. So that's hot. Okay, so if that's right here at your house, right, unless you have some device to protect it, then the wire leaving there and going up is also unprotected. So if a storm comes by and tears it down, right, it's on fire and everybody's shot and dead anyway. What we propose is what everybody here does, is that we allow everyone here to have a main disconnect downstairs where you and me and everybody else can turn the power off to that house, okay, and the wires going in the house are protected. That's the difference between a knowledge base and a not knowledge base. Because when they're putting them up there on those platforms, they've got back-to-back services, they're not gonna put add an extra $200 or $300 to that house. They're gonna run that wire 5 feet in the house, and then they're gonna put that panel in there, and you're gonna have 5 feet of unprotected property. A wave that will tear that meter off the house is going to tear that conduit off the house, and that wire's gonna be unprotected. Ours is not going to be unprotected. That's why I wrote this. This is for protection of people at Holden Beach, and it's serviceable. Remember, the meter base gets rained in every day. It's not waterproof. The wires that are feeding it are already down there. So, and how many of you think that we're gonna be allowed to put platforms on the side of the house? We're gonna be here having another discussion like parking. Because now you can't encroach 5 feet into the setbacks. And you gotta have a platform that the meter reader from Brunswick Electric can walk up on, and now that platform's got to be built to a high wind zone standard. Do we wanna get in all this? No. I would recommend passing this.
Is there a motion?
Motion. Yes. Motion to approve ordinance 19-14 as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Oh, there's one other thing too. So people that are in here that have contract, or we're talking about a contract. The building code didn't make any of this effective until January. So what we did was any permits that are out there, but they haven't been notified, they don't have to, the standard is the same as it was before. So they're already grandfathered, so to speak.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Number 13, Mr. Hewitt.
Yes, sir. There's a memo in your package tonight. Subject is request for proposals for legal services. We published a request for proposals for legal services in the local paper and also in the League of Municipalities website. We received 4 proposals. Subject to that, we received an additional one. The firms who have responded to that request are Grady Richardson, the Bro Law Firm, Matthew Nickel, and Richard Green, in addition to Huey Marshall.
Any discussion?
Yes. I would suggest that before we make a decision on which firm to hire, that we have an interview process. I worked for a Fortune 100 company. I hired and dismissed attorneys as part of my job. I never hired a firm without interviewing the principals in that firm. And so I would suggest that we have another special meeting, although but it'll take 4 or 5 hours to interview each of these firms sequentially. And I would suggest that we do that sometime in the near future.
Sounds like a plan.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
sooner the better.
I have a couple of questions, but I'll wait for the attorneys.
May I suggest to the clerk that memo that you're gonna send on the other issue? Ask the same question about this. All right, anything else on that? Everybody ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Number 14. Ms. Pat?
This was just a request. I kind of do a lot of homework when I understand what's going to be coming up in the meeting, and sometimes we don't get the packet until a little bit later. Sometimes we get it fairly quickly. And I would just like it to be the norm that a week before the meeting, when the agenda is supposed to have been finalized, that we receive the agenda. So if there's recurring items or something, we have time to start digging into background before we receive the full packet. It's like happened this week. We did get the agenda in advance of getting the packet. I found that to be very helpful. It gave me extra time to prepare myself.
So you're asking for the agenda, not the full packet?
I'd like the agenda is supposed to be finalized by Tuesday, no later than Tuesday, because that's a week ahead of time. When that agenda's done, if that could be formally provided, and of course, it'll be accessible by the public if they want it too, but that does give some extra time to start preparing, digging back into previous packets if there's a topic that we've discussed before. And again, it just gives some additional time to start getting yourself together.
Is this not in our rules of procedure?
No,
It's not?
no.
Because
5 days.
We decided
I
that.
thought it was a week
4 years
ahead,
ago.
Heather.
It's
wasn't
not
it?
that we get it, though. I'm saying that we get automatically sent the agenda. It is not, the agenda is supposed to be closed out, yes.
But our
and-
plan
but-
was to distribute it to the public.
But that has not been the norm, that is not spelled out.
It was meant to be. That was meant to be that would be distributed.
Do you know,
Am I
Heather?
right,
I don't remember ever reading that. We send the packet out. There's
Yeah.
certain dates that we follow to get the agenda done, but the agenda really, Peter and I are the only one that sees it until the packet goes out.
Right. And what I'm suggesting is it's very helpful as, again, I just work a little bit slower maybe,
but
but,
once it's done, we should
but
have no
once the
reason.
agenda's done, it's very helpful to have it even in advance of the packet.
I mean,
I would suggest it be
we
made to the
can
public.
back up, yeah, we can, I don't see any problem with that.
No.
I don't either. I just would want to be clear, because right now the sunshine list gets the agenda, and I actually send the agenda, but there's a link back to the packet online. So I wouldn't want to really send
Do it
two different
twice.
emails and be overdoing it for people. So would you prefer that I send the agenda email to the sunshine list as just the agenda, or wait until the packet goes out like we're doing? And obviously, if anybody in the public wanted the agenda, they would just have to ask me for it. But where do you want me to put the sunshine list in that process?
Well, I don't want to cause you any additional work. If the public knows they can come and get the agenda, they can email you, say, can you just send me the agenda? Is that sufficient?
So
It's-
just send like the actual agenda to the board as soon as we finalize it? Is that, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
That's
It's
what
just for
I
prep.
want.
It's for prep
Yeah,
for the board.
That's what I
Right.
want, but if there are legal things we have to follow beyond that, I accept that, but,
Oh, not at all. No, I
Okay.
just didn't know if that was the intention. I
I'm
could
good
definitely
with
send
that.
it.
yeah. Okay.
Are we on number 15?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Pat?
Yes. There had been a number of discussions, and at last BOC meeting, it was actually raised, I think, by Commissioner Butler that, okay, if the audit committee needs, some clarification, if the ordinance isn't right, why don't we get this solved? And I actually went into some of the audit committee background things. I looked at the ordinance. I had been to a couple audit committee meetings where people were raising, well, I don't see how we do this the way, I don't see how we do this, we're not doing this. And I thought, you know, this almost seems as if the audit committee maybe is struggling a little bit, that there hasn't been a clear charge lately given to them, or it reminds me of creating a new department in business, and you put together everything that's this is what your job is, but it didn't get reduced to the next level by the committee or by the Board of Commissioners, but here's what we want your deliverables to be, you know, to meet your powers and duties or, you know, your responsibilities. So I went through the ordinance, and my 3-page paper is basically making suggestions of how I would reword the ordinance in different sections, in addition to, for a number of the powers and duties, things that I believe would need to be developed by the audit committee or by the board, however it's at our pleasure. But there needs to be more clear process and transparency to how decisions get reached and recommendations get made. For example, when the audit committee is approving the audit report, and that is an important, you know, approving that they agree that this is sufficient, however, but it's broad as we all agree, but there's not a sort of, how did you decide that? Where's your checklist of what you looked at? There's oversight, there's like the discussion on point 5 where, you know, you've got in the audit, review, advise, and make recommendations with respect to the town's treasury management function, risk management policies. I believe that it's not meant to have that much continual oversight, but there should be a periodic check. But what are you proposing to do? You know, what do you propose, how are you proposing to do this? So when you have these powers and duties and there's no clear procedure for how you're going to fulfill them and how you're going to deliver decisions and recommendations, I think that is what's causing the confusion. I think that an audit committee can bring a great deal of value if it has processes in place and decision-making becomes transparent. So these 3 pages that I put into the packet are a combination of what I believe the ordinance should be reworded to say, and in many places, what I believe the audit committee or the Board of Commissioners should focus on to define processes and checklists that allow the audit committee to follow a procedure to deliver decisions and recommendations. Frankly, what I would like to see is that the board, I would move that the board approve putting together an ordinance that follows a lot of these recommendations so that we can clearly examine it, and that out of this there is a list created of what the board requests the audit committee develop for their deliverables and their recommendations, and that we can come to an agreement on this so that the audit committee going into next year doesn't have the confusion that I'm sensing at some of the meetings about, I don't see us doing all these things and it's not clear how to do them.
You said a whole lot there.
Well, it took me a long time to analyze this, so.
And I don't disagree with most of what you said. I would focus on passing this to the audit committee and get their understanding of the process and.
Okay, first off, we're the Board of Commissioners for improving the ordinance, okay? I don't, I again am coming to.
Can I speak?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
We spent 6 months doing this ordinance. Very, very long time. It started very, very different, and we were, I don't know what word you want to use, we were very fluid in making changes, very, very much. So, we've gotten down to, one page, and I think the audit committee should have the autonomy to, and they're the experts, to develop processes that fall within, they're the financial experts. They're the ones that do audits, that they can come to us, if you'd like to have us understand and us approve. But we do have, assist and advise the oversight responsibility for the financial reporting process, the financial controls, the external audit process. We have a lot of things in there about process that I think they're just starting to do. I think they had a kind of a weird start because of the audit started in, October, when it should have started this month. So it was, I think they're just now getting to a point where they're focusing on process and trying to find their way into how they're going to go forward.
Well, in each of
Okay.
these, I do talk about the audit committee developing a process or a checklist or a method.
That's why.
But I think that what would be very, as I said, I think what would be very helpful is if, based on my 3 pages of analysis, if we created what it means to the ordinance and pull out of here what the list is of what we would be putting to the audit committee is these are the kinds of things we think need to be done. This would be giving, I think, useful direction. It's like 4 years in doing a second charge to the committee of here's what we're thinking, and then yes, have a dialogue with them, and I agree with you that they have a lot of the responsibility and the knowledge, but I still think there's some places that they're just not sure exactly what they need.
Sure.
And
So-
if we fix it into something that next month we could come and sit and say, yeah, we agree that this works, now let's pass it to the audit committee.
We built that into the ordinance, because the ordinance was passed on 12/18/18. And if you look at number 10, it's review and assess the adequacy of this charter at least every 2 years. So it's only been, I don't know, less than 1 year. So it's built in to do exactly what you're talking about. I think it's a little too soon, and I think they haven't had an opportunity to do what's already in this ordinance.
I have sat at least 2 audit committees meetings recently where members are actually asking, how do we do this?
Yeah.
What is it we're really supposed to do? I am just suggesting that bringing it back for us to give our suggestions is appropriate at this point in time. And it's not been just one member raising it. It's been 2 and even 3 at times. So when I get that at multiple meetings, it's like, I think the board can provide suggestions of direction. Again, the audit committee is at the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners.
Yep.
And when things are floundering, when you hear people, basically asking for clarifications, I think it doesn't matter if it's only been less than a year. We are bound to we should give the clarification and direction.
I actually disagree with that in that we have a very qualified audit committee right now. But from my own history, I will tell you, you don't become an audit committee the first 2 or 3 meetings you're on the board, on the committee. It takes a year or 2 to become an effective audit committee member. And there were CPAs that have been out practicing in one, not a municipal. People we brought in didn't know municipal accounting. They have to learn it. David gave them a lot of inputs. They've done their own studies. I would recommend we leave it as it is, and at the end of another year, if they don't bring to the board all their checklists for each of their areas, and they're already working on some of them now, then the board might take a more aggressive action or find themselves another audit committee chair or some other way to organize the committee. But it takes time to be able to do this, and working with the finance director, with the auditor,
Well,
with the process, it just takes time. And I would recommend leaving them alone right now, letting them find their way in the next couple of meetings. And if you're not satisfied then we take action.
well, quite honestly, one of the first things I raised was, it seemed odd to me that it looked like audit committees, our audit committee members only have a one-year term. So that was one of the very first things that I commented on, that I think that it should be a longer service like other committees, because your argument about it takes multiple years, yet every year the committee members have to be reapproved, so this doesn't fit together very well to me.
Well, I can't disagree with that, and we've already talked about that possibility. And what we've done is we've just simply extended. Nobody's been asked to get off the audit committee in a number of years. Because when they become really effective, it's a really good audit committee. If we as a board feel that we want to change that to a 2-year, 3-year assignment, rolling at 3, 2, whatever, I'm sure the audit committee's not going to have any issues with that at all. But I think we would not have to do anything right now, other than if we choose to change the tenure of the audit committee, that's fine. And I think they will want to stay on that committee. The members will want to stay on it. But if we find some that aren't effective, and the chair tells you we ought to consider somebody else who's better qualified or who would be a better committee member, we'd do that.
I think that we should rewrite the ordinance and take a look at it based on what I'm recommending, to see whether or not it provides more clarity, and not just more clarity, but also more of what a committee is supposed to do in terms of oversight, rather than having it look as if there is a responsibility that the committee is not supposed to have.
You want my opinion? I just think, again, and not that I want to agree with Peter on this, but I'm at a particular point in time that I really don't want to do anything to micromanage a very selective, great group of CPAs. And they need some experience, some more experience in working with the current ordinance that they've been given. And I think I know some of them well enough that if they have a problem with a specific item within this ordinance, that they're going to come forward and bring it to our attention. From the meetings that I've attended, there's a couple of things that, Pat, you recommended that I can certainly agree with. But I just don't want to send the wrong tone and the wrong message here.
Okay. Well, while we're discussing this issue, I've had an issue, and I think there are two things that aren't really addressed with Pat's memo that I would like us to consider as a group. Number one is, and I've stated it before, the audit committee is the only committee that doesn't have public comment. We should have, that should be in, if we're not going to do it voluntarily, despite the fact that we changed our procedures, then we should add that. And the other thing is, I believe this for every committee, that we have a committee, and the committee should speak to us as a committee. I shouldn't be getting memos from individuals on any committee. If you want to speak on any topic that you're not a committee member, feel free. But on a topic that you're a committee member, you go through the audit committee chairperson, or you go with the designee from the audit committee, but I don't need to get 5 different memos from various people on the committee. We've had that. I asked the audit committee chair whether he thought that was appropriate, and my answer was, well, he's on the committee. There was no action taken about that after the first one.
Well,
Now
I
we had
agree.
the second one. I asked you that question on the first one, now we had the second one. And I think that should be put in there, that the committee speaks as a committee, not as an individual
I
member.
fully agree with you. And I also feel comfortable now, we have a session at the beginning for public comment on the agenda.
Do we have to put it in this, each in the ordinance, or didn't we put it as a general, all of
We
our
ch-
committees, Mike?
We changed it.
we
It's in
We
the-
changed
in
it,
our
but
rules of
subsequent to that, they were
Yes.
still refused the
Yes.
opportunity to speak at the audit committee meetings.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
It
been
has
changed.
refused.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been
Okay.
changed, but the
Okay.
effect, it hasn't been instituted.
But the
Okay,
message
so it
is
should
loud and
be,
clear.
so it should be. I agree with both your comments.
Okay.
And I'll ensure that both of those are in effect at the next meeting.
You make me a happy man.
Anything else on this issue? Let's see, where are we? On number 16?
Yep.
I'm just asking that in the interest of keeping our agendas a bit shorter, which should also save us a bit of time, that a couple things that have been recurring items that have had discussion be changed. As I said, I think that since Lift Station 4 has been done, we've kept Leo. The board had requested a monthly update on the progress of Lift Station 4. And I would just say that as we get into 3, a quarterly update or as an update as needed should be enough. I don't think we need Chris up here every month giving us a 5. I trust that the town, if something comes up, will tell us, but we could say a quarterly update would be enough. Since the board, as a board, requested it of him, I think that if we're gonna change it, the board should just agree, yes, we're satisfied with a quarterly update, or you will update us as needed, but it doesn't need to be monthly. And the second one is, when we started the Inlet Beach Protection Board, and they were charged to do a summary at the end of the meeting, I went back into that discussion, and it actually was stated that it didn't have to be a formal agenda item. It could just be included in the packet for us to read it.
Okay.
So I would actually say, by all means, let's put it in the packet, but we don't have to have it as a line item that then even takes 3 sentences to say, yes, I agree with it. It's in the packet. If anything really critical is happening, somebody from that board will come and give us a presentation. So it's just, it's
Sure,
in
sure,
there.
sure. So if
but
it's in the packet, can we,
we can
if
just-
it's in the packet and we want to talk to it, we can talk to it? If it isn't on an agenda item? I'm just curious.
We could add it
Yeah.
as an agenda item if we thought there was something
Okay.
that was important.
Yeah.
I mean, and that
Okay.
could probably be done as, added as an agenda item at the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
But-
And it's there. Okay,
Right,
I'm good with that.
but it doesn't have to be an
You know, they're,
automatic.
and the reason why
Right,
we
yeah,
did
yeah.
it, they're important,
Yeah.
and if Chris, as needed, quarterly or as needed, I'm comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with either one. If
Because
people-
normally, big projects, you
Right.
want to be
Right, but now,
constantly updated,
now
right.
things are moving
Fine.
and, but, so do we want to ask for a quarterly or just an as needed?
I'd say both.
I would suggest that the manager cover it in his report, those items like that. I think that's a more appropriate way to handle that. That's a capital expense. It just happens to be a sewer lift station. It could be a water line next time. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I thought all of us were kind of on the edge of our seat with lift station number 4.
Yeah.
And that's why you agreed to a monthly update.
So
It's just
then-
like anything else in life. Now that we've experienced that and we've gone through the growing pains of it, I would have no problem with what David is recommending.
Okay, I
Okay.
mean, we could always, we always can ask Chris
Yeah.
any questions if we need it as well,
Yeah.
so that's,
Because we had issues with the steel being late, we had other issues along the path, and it was good to hear that. It's good for the public to hear it too, as well.
yep.
I'm perfectly satisfied if David just makes it part of his report. Then we're agreed?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sure Chris will appreciate that.
If they stay home.
All right, Mr. Hewitt.
Speaking of the audit, want to let the board know that the Local Government Commission has approved the 30 June 18 year-ending audit. They've also approved the new contract for the upcoming year, and we're moving forward with the auditor selected, Jay Sharp of Rives and Associates, to map out the schedule to get that audit completed in a timely fashion. From a staff perspective, I want to point out that Tim Evans has been selected to attend the, wait a minute. Tim Evans has been handpicked to attend the North Carolina Insurance Commissioners Code College the last week of September. That's a big deal, y'all, and is an actual outshoot of some of the conversations that have taken place during the contractors' workshops. That's a big deal, and that's about all I can say about that. We've onboarded David Wright, the new Public Works employee, last week. So another thing that I'm sure Chris is glad of, that he's got another qualified person in the office there. Not in the office, on the truck, on the street. The most recent that we have on the Lockwood Folly Bin Widener Navigation Project, that is part of the alternate bid for the Lockwood Folly Inlet Crossing Maintenance Dredging Contract. And what we're talking about here, y'all, is the Lockwood Folly Crossing Project. If you see the hash marked part on the map here, looks kind of like an old-timey dipper. The handle piece of it, yeah.
You're talking about
Yeah. You got it, Joe. You got it. The handle piece, yeah, but the handle piece is the portion that's funded by the feds. That's the federal money. The cup portion is where the sand is. That's what we call the bend widener, and the reason for that is when the tugboats push barges down the river, the intercoastal waterway, they have to be able to make the turn based on tides there, and so that is we're interested in navigation, but the cup is where the sand is. So that bid opening on the contract is scheduled for this Friday at 2 o'clock. We're still waiting to hear the results from Fish and Wildlife on the biological opinion before the Widener option, that's the cup piece on that map, before it can be awarded. The word from the program manager is that there's a low risk of not receiving the biological opinion in time to award the option for the bin widener. The county is scheduled or is committed to reimburse the town for 25% of the local share. That is that the county is supposed to give us just shy of $100,000. Meanwhile, the east end is changing. This is a picture on the east end, and let's see, I've been working here, this is 12 years, and I haven't seen the east end doing this since I've been here. I don't think that, and I'm not speaking for the mayor, that this is something that has manifested itself in the near recent past. But something is going on here, and we don't know if it's a cause and effect because the inlet's not being dredged or what. But we are seeing changes that heretofore have not been seen on the east end in the last decade or so. Along the lines of FEMA, Florence and Michael, environmental and historic section of FEMA is still holding up our project worksheets, as are all coastal projects. We've provided and worked with FEMA through Franway and ATM to provide them with some additional information, but as of right now, those two hurricane projects are held up in environmental. Along the lines of other hurricanes that we're still working on, we've been denied. We had a pending $330,000 reimbursement request in for Matthew that had been held up for some time. We've received word that we have been denied approximately $180,000 of that reimbursement request, but we are, through working with the project manager, we believe that that $180,000 that was disapproved under Matthew could possibly be approved as an Irene reimbursement. So we're actually going back, we're not appealing the Matthew denial, but we're actually going back in and reopening the Irene file in order to attempt to qualify those expenses. $180,000, still $180,000. So this is an unheard of consequence, is that we are currently working 4 hurricane reimbursement projects simultaneously, and we'll just keep the iron in the fire and see what comes out of it. We're still looking for sand. We're still looking to get started on looking for sand. We've had some weather over the course of the last couple of weeks that has delayed our hydrographic survey. We need seas, we need slick water. We need the seas to be 2 feet or less, and that hasn't been the case here. When you get out to about 3 miles, it gets too bumpy. But we will be proceeding next week, and we'll just have to see what comes out of that. On the Central Reach project front, I'm proud to announce that we've actually the Central Reach project, Holden Beach, has been selected as a spotlight presentation at the October meeting of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association annual meeting in Myrtle Beach. So that's in October. We'll be working up a presentation that's suitable for public consumption at that point in time. Last but not least, remind everybody that we're 2 weeks away from the anniversary of Hurricane Florence. We're still hung up in environmental on getting our project worksheets approved from Hurricane Florence. I think that it's an easy statement to say, although we've been really busy, it's been a wonderful summer so far. There's still 2 weeks to go. I would like to point out that there's still people that are in recovery mode, not too far from here. When you ride up and down the beach, we were back in operation, full up with our sewer system in a couple or 3 days. We had the cash registers back open. We were putting people in houses, and there were some issues to deal with, but all in all, people were back in their homes fairly soon. I want to specifically point out the fact that, and it's something that no one probably realizes, but we've actually had a staff member that is just now moving back into their home after being displaced for a year. So it's not just people that are inland from here and up the road, it's people that are close by. And one of the staff members is one of yours that has been displaced. Along those lines, get your decals. Please get your decals. Have your plan in place. Know what you're going to do when a voluntary evacuation takes place. Know what you're going to do with your pets. Know where you're going to go if you have to leave. And I would encourage you to sign up for our automated blast system if you're not on that system already. And that's all I have to say.
following up what you said, Mr. Hewitt, also know what you're gonna do if it's a mandatory evacuation.
Where are you gonna go?
Yeah, and also, following up on something that was said earlier, about if you're ordered to, stay on your property, I'm gonna tell you that listen carefully, because that order may be to stay on your property where you live. Because one of the problems we've had in the past is an owner saying, oh, okay, I'll stay on my property, but I own a house 4 blocks down and 1, 2 miles down, and they're riding up down the beach, taking pictures and giving everybody, you know, a personal reporting thing. So be sure you listen to the situation that we're in, and have your plan and work your plan. We are moving along in hurricane season. We've been mighty lucky. Big concern is the water temperatures up and down the coast. Not good. That's what hurricanes consider food, and that's what makes them bad and dangerous. So we've been lucky so far. Hope the good Lord's in a good mood, and that's those give us a break this year. We certainly need one. We have 2 concerts left this coming Sunday and in the holiday weekend. So if you've never been to one, you've still got 2 chances this year. It's really amazing, and Christy and her staff do a great job with that, but it's just amazing to me how we do not have problems at those concerts. People seem to enjoy a family atmosphere, you know, to watch these little 2 and 3 and 4-year-old kids get out there and jump up and down with their parents dancing, having a good time. And, you know, we don't have fights and we don't have disruptions, thanks to the good work of the police department and the quality of people that live and enjoy Holden Beach. So it's a wonderful thing. So overall, I think we've had a good season, and I'm looking forward to finishing up that way. And with that, sir, Mr. Fletcher, what do you have to say tonight?
I have to say, I'm impressed that not one person left the meeting tonight. Normally, people give up. Oh, did one? Sorry, one left. One left. We'll take that name. But it is great to have people that stay through the meeting and hear all the discussion that goes on. The other is, if you're not aware of the Turtle Patrol situation, 2013 was our highest number of nests that we had was 73. We topped out this year with 104. And we had a lot of nests that we didn't know were there, called wild nests. We missed it, either we missed it when we dug the nest to see if there were eggs, or we missed the tracks completely. It's like 7 or 8 different nests that have just showed up out of nowhere. So it's really, really busy on the beach. We're in like nest 56 or something, 58 right now is hatching. So we're about halfway through that program. And a lot of that has to do with the heat, I think, in the water out there, but it's all up and down the coast. So if you get a chance, when they have a closing out there, you can see the babies. Almost every nest that's been closed has had at least one baby. One had 75. So, and actually one had over 100 babies still left in the nest to watch at 8 o'clock at night go out to the beach. So thank you again for being here. Yeah.
Mike?
I would just like to thank everybody who comes, same people. It's like friends, but thanks for coming.
Ms. Pat?
Thanks for your attendance and for everything you do to try to keep us on track.
Joe?
I'd like to thank everybody for attending this evening, and especially I'd like to thank my fellow colleagues and town staff pertaining to a difficult subject on parking, and I look forward to the next discussion.
Peter?
Yeah, I'll say thank you again to everyone. Thanks.
Public comments, I believe, is the next item. Anybody want to speak about anything you're happy or upset about? It's okay to say something nice. Anyone? All righty. Seeing and hearing no request to speak.
Move we adjourn.
We have a closed session.
Madam Clerk?
We'll get a closed session.
Closed session.
All righty, Madam Clerk.
Okay, executive session pursuant to North Carolina General
Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair will entertain a motion to come out of executive session. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're back in regular session. Is there a motion? Motion to adjourn. All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.